Let's see if this is, yes, there we go. This is working. Good morning, South by Southwest. My name's Cecilia Noel, and I'm here today to introduce our distinguished panelists. I'm an associate editor at Stranger's Guide. We're an award-winning publication that commissions stories from local writers and photographers to build authentic portraits of place from Scandinavia to Tehran, Lagos, and Colombia. You can learn more about what we do at strangersguide.com, but today I'm here to introduce our panelists. Alex Zhang is the de facto mayor at Friends with Benefits, a crypto-enabled cultural membership and community. Formerly, he was the creative director and president of Summit Series, a global community and events company. Nadia Tolokonikova is a conceptual artist, activist, and founding member of Pussy Riot, a global feminist protest art movement. Pussy Riot stands for gender fluidity, inclusivity, matriarchy, love, laughter, decentralization, anarchy, and anti-authoritarianism. Michael Casey is CoinDesk's chief content officer and co-founder of Streambed Media. Michael was previously senior advisor to MIT Media Lab's Digital Currency Initiative and a global finance columnist at the Wall Street Journal. He has published 5 books, including The Truth Machine, The Blockchain and the Future of Everything, and The Age of Cryptocurrency, both co-authored with Paul Vigna. Kimball Musk is a chef, restaurateur, philanthropist, and food entrepreneur. He is the co-founder and CEO of the Kitchen Restaurant Group, Big Green, and the executive chairman of Square Roots. Please join me in welcoming our panel to the stage. Yeah.
I always like it when you get woos as you're walking on stage. That's a good sign, I think, everybody. So thank you. I'm Michael Casey, Chief Content Officer at CoinDesk. We are the leading media outlet covering blockchain, digital assets, cryptocurrency. We've been doing this for some time. We're also the hosts of the Consensus Conference, which will be here in Austin, June 9th, 12th, including this man, and I think Alex, you're going to be there as well. So just a little bit of a plug to start with, but you know, every panelist says that they've lucked out and got the best of all panels, but I'm telling you I have this. If you want to explore the weird, wonderful, confusing, exciting, God knows what else world of DAOs, you couldn't ask for this type of panel, anything better than this. These are the rock stars. So what we're going to do, I think, because obviously there is probably a variety of knowledge and understanding of what this thing's all about. So I'm first going to throw to Alex, and he's just going to give us the mayor's take on what a DAO is. And then Kimball's going to give us a bit of a presentation on the Big Green Dow, and then we're going to open this up for a discussion. But Alex, what is a DAO?
What is a DAO? We get asked that quite a bunch these days, I guess. But a DAO stands for Decentralized Autonomous Organization. I think in this early stage.
Can we get hands raised? Who's
that would be good.
Knows what this is?
Yeah. Who's?
Okay.
All right. Great.
All right. Yeah,
that's good. Yeah.
Only about half.
Good.
Yeah.
Excellent. Still, there's some that would like to know.
Not many are fully decentralized or fully autonomous yet, but we're working on that, and it's in its early stages. The easiest sort of analogies I always use to explain is you can think of it on one spectrum as simple as a group chat with a shared bank account, right? This idea of online communities forming quite instantaneously, pulling together on-chain assets and creating governance structures to find ways to deploy those assets in a way that is aligned with the group. And then on the other end, you can think of them as well as sort of organizational or governing structures. So no different than think LLCs or C Corps in terms of corporate ways to organize. DAOs sort of at least highlight or illuminate ways to operate in non-corporate structures while having a lot of the benefits that corporate structures entail, such as value accrual to all different entities and components within that organization, and just an overall organizing structure that can sort of scale and hopefully create ways where its contributors or its users can be more closely aligned with the fundamental platform and organization itself.
Wonderful. I couldn't have said it better at all. One of the things that's I think people are looking to as a powerful potential use case for DAOs is charity, is the distribution of philanthropy, of donations, and that's really where Big Green Dow is all about. So why don't you tell us about the Big Green Dow Experiment.
Sure.
Walk us through what that's all about, and then we'll open it up after that.
Yeah, I think for this audience, I'd like to set the stage for the conversation using Big Green Dow as an example. I'm not a young Web3 player, and I knew what it was like in the 90s trying to explain to old people that the internet was awesome. And I would get a lot of people looking at me saying that you're just an idiot, and honestly, incredibly rough responses from the older community. And when I saw this Web3 stuff happen from very smart young people, I just really was determined to be a better old person. So I started working on DAOs about a year ago. Our Big Green is a nonprofit. We build pre-COVID. We built 650 beautiful outdoor classrooms, learning gardens that teach kids science through the growing of foods. We were on the ground training tens of thousands of teachers a year, teaching 350,000 kids every school day. It was really an extraordinary nonprofit that completely imploded because of COVID. Schools were closed. When last summer came along, we were told that even though they were going to reopen schools, we would not be allowed to do our work. And in the middle of all this, I'm just trying to figure out, well, how can we be helpful in the world of food justice in a way that is innovative? And I'm spending lots and lots of time during COVID with Web3 people, Web3 young kids, 22, 23, 24, 25, that just talk to me about this new world of a decentralized autonomous organization. And I'm going to start with a high-level point, which I often have this argument with my daughter of the difference of which is better, capitalism or communism. And we've always had those two choices. And the decentralized autonomous organization, for the first time, feels like there is a third choice. And I think just like any governance structure, the people matter. So you could screw it up. You screw up capitalism, you can screw up communism, you can screw up a DAO. But it is different. It's actually a very, very different community-oriented approach to deploying capital. If you think about capitalism, it's known for the most efficient way to allocate resources. DAO is just different. And so in our case, what we've done is, unlike most DAOs where they might have tens of thousands of people join, we started with $1 million treasury that I put in and donated. And these beautiful, amazing people you see on the screen here are the DAO members. And we only started with 6. And those 6 are nonprofits. They received a $50,000 grant each, not in return for being on the DAO, just for the good work they're doing. And we asked them to be on the DAO committee. And they took it on in a way that really is the most beautiful way to take it on. Take it on with a sense of responsibility that if they get this right, and I'll explain what it is in a moment, that they could possibly change the world of philanthropy. So getting it right is they now have to decide what to do with the treasury. Every quarter, they donate money to other nonprofits in food justice. We work in food. And every time they make a donation, that recipient gets a vote as well. So this quarter, they went from 6 people voting, and they added another 12. Now they're at 18 people voting for next quarter, and then they will decide. And the donors will also get a vote. But let's say with the nonprofits for a second, this is the first time they get control of a treasury to support other nonprofits. And they have to do it in a communal way. They have to do it through voting, proper on-chain voting. And when they vote, the money is distributed. It's a level of power that these folks have never imagined they would receive. And it's also decentralizing power. So they not only have the power, but this quarter they have, this group of 6 have the power, and they kind of lose most of their power by next quarter, and then that group will have power, and then they'll kind of lose most of their power by the next quarter as we progressively decentralize the DAO. So I think at a high level, decentralized autonomous organizations have the potential to change how we govern countries, how we govern companies, how we govern communities. It is a combination of anonymous, pseudonymous, or totally, they know who you are, you can decide, and you're really moving real money around. And it's the potential for it blew my mind. And so I've run this experiment. We started in October of last year. We're running it through September 30th. And if things don't blow up in bad ways, then we'll keep going. And it's been amazing, the reception from the Web3 community. We've gotten over 1,700 donors that have come in and been very supportive. There is no way to make money in our DAO. You get a token, but it's a voting token. You can't transfer it. It's not worth anything. We may come up with other ideas over time, but we really wanted to experiment with the governance system of giving power to a community and letting them make very important decisions, and let's see if the results are better. And I think they will be.
Great, Kimball. I mean, hearing that, maybe you've picked up, there's really interesting issues to explore here about governance, about this sort of more dynamic token-driven democracy. But let's just start looking at what some of the use cases are, like some of the more sort of exciting ways in which DAOs are now being used and how it's being applied. And I don't think we could possibly ask for a more immediate and dramatic one than the one that Nadia is overseeing. So you tell us all about Ukraine DAO, Nadia. And also I'm wondering, I mean, you heard Kimball there just talking about the contrast between capitalism and communism, and as a Russian citizen, your experience would be pretty interesting to take on where you see DAOs fitting in with that spectrum. But first of all, just start with Ukraine DAO and what inspired you to do it. Obviously, you've got Unicorn DAO. The floor's yours.
Ukraine DAO was started when Putin started a war in Ukraine, and we wanted to help somehow. And I believe that activism is not just good for the world, but it's also good for your own mental health, because you can't look at the tragedy and do nothing about it. So me and some of my friends, some people I didn't know before starting a DAO with them, we decided to start this initiative, and it's not the first one I'm participating of this kind. There was a free Ross DAO dedicated to Ross Ulbricht, who's serving double life sentence in American prison for starting a website, Silk Road, which I find really excessive reaction to life sentences. So we were able to raise millions and millions of dollars to help his family, to help to hire better lawyers, and also he has in mind initiative to help family members of prisoners to travel and see them, because often the government doesn't care about prisoners, so they move you to a place that's really, really far from your home state. And not everyone's rich, not at all. Anyway, so the reason why I personally came into the Web3 because I wanted to find better tools for activism, and it definitely provides really interesting opportunities. Blockchain provides interesting opportunities for people who want to find better governance systems. But okay, we're talking about Ukraine DAO. We can get in that later.
Well, I'm also very interested. Look, tell us about Ukraine DAO, but I want to dig down a little bit into this idea of empowering prisoners, which I think is an interesting framing here. But Ukraine is such an immediate story, and they needed funding so quickly. Tell us the story behind that.
Really easy. We launched one NFT, Ukrainian flag. It was actually on chain. The NFT, the image itself was on chain because it's fairly easy to. It's an easy picture. It's just two colors. So unless you destroy the whole planet, you can't really destroy that NFT. It's stored pretty much forever. The reason why we picked Ukrainian flag, because we didn't want it to be about any special aesthetics or any ego. There were a lot of artists who wanted to participate, including me, but then I quickly realized that it's just, I don't know, personally to me it was off. I know a lot of artists created art pieces about Ukraine. That's amazing and super valid, but my own goal here was to get united under Ukrainian flag. And we started Party Bid, which is a tool that allows people to bid collectively on an art piece. And we put the initial reserved price of 1,000 ETH, and we were debating actually to put maybe 10,000 ETH, but that would to make people less motivated, I guess, to participate, because then they would feel like their contribution is not as important. And we actually met this in less than 24 hours, and then it started to increase, and we ran into a couple of roadblocks, but we solved them with help of our fellow DAO members. Of our fellow DAOs like Blizzard DAO, members of Free Ras DAO. I'm not going to get into technical details, but I'm going to bore you to death. But the story, the main takeaway from the story is we were able to raise $7 million, over $7 million in a matter of just a few days. But even more important, we were able to distribute this money really quickly. And it also, raising money on chain helped us to protect people who would otherwise be in danger for donating to Ukraine. For example, people in Russia who donate to Ukraine, they're being prosecuted, their bank accounts are being frozen. So with crypto, you can escape that. More than that, in Russia and Ukraine, the role of crypto is rising rapidly right now. Not because of good reason, but in Russia because of sanctions, in Ukraine because infrastructure is being damaged, obviously because of the war. And I think, to me, this Ukraine DAO is more than just raised $7 million. It's a big jump for crypto, and we spoke about that on Twitter Spaces with Vitalik Buterin, who is the co-founder of Ethereum. And for us, and he's also in the DAO, he's also a supporter of the DAO. He's one of the people who tweeted about this DAO first. And we both think that it's a big step from crypto to being perceived as just cartoon images that can be sold for more money. They've been bought. I love NFTs, but even more than NFTs, I love to solve global problems. And I think we showed that you can tackle global problems with help of crypto.
And just in case anyone wants to support it, go follow her on Twitter, Ukraine DAO. And I just made a donation this morning. It's very easy. If you have a Web3 wallet, go Ukraine.
But actually, so right now, I would even encourage you to donate directly to Ukraine. What's really interesting about Ukraine as a country, it's incredibly progressive, and it adopted crypto in the beginning of the war really quickly. So now you can actually donate directly to Ukraine if you wish so.
So there you go. This, 24 hours, $7 million. This exercise, in a sense, in many ways, gathering the passion of all these people immediately. But I think something that you said, Nadia, that's really resonated there is the fact that people in Russia who wouldn't otherwise be able to participate can. When people are always looking for what it is about the anonymity and the pseudonymity of participating in crypto, here you have a use case, right? And the other thing that I think is really telling is that this comes from your first experience being the Free Ras DAO, because you were also a prisoner for 2 years in Russia. And if there is ever a community that is disempowered and has no capacity to express their wishes through normal democratic processes, it's prisoners. So the idea that now through this technology there is an exercise of will that is possible, I think is a very, very powerful idea. But you've been exploring all this stuff, Alex, through the Friends with Benefits, one of the most prominent DAOs, if not the most, been around for quite a while, all sorts of learnings here. Start off by just telling us a little bit about why it was created, what was the motive behind it, and what have you been able to do in terms of constructive projects and so forth with FWB.
Friends with Benefits was frankly kind of an online accident, but it was really an exploration by one of our founders, Trevor McFredris, who had started Little Michaela and has sort of worked in entertainment, art, and culture. And the seed of the idea was always an exploration of how do you allow for value to accrue to the edges of a cultural network or a cultural community. We'd all participated in different forms of cultural movements, from art and fashion and music, and had always found this sort of lopsided approach to when capital starts to enter the equation, and how a lot of the artists who were there in the earlier stages, or even sort of the rings of community members or supporters or patrons of, say, a specific band or a specific cultural pocket, how it quickly would sort of be co-opted and often like lose track of its own, not able to retain its own sort of cultural value and store it within the network. And what started as sort of a weekend project where Trevor had created the FWB token, put it on chain, I think tweeted about it, sent it to a bunch of his friends. There was literally no value. Has now grown into one of the largest social tokens in terms of unique wallet holders, which is something we're really proud of, and is a community and is a DAO that onboards Web3 or onboards cultural creators and maintainers into Web3 and teaches them tools, gives them community, has a whole host and network of events as a way to sort of create that bridge between these two worlds. And what sort of has transpired over the last year and a half is now an exploration still of what a community-owned sort of social network looks like, or what a community-owned brand looks like, and whatever brand means. But this idea of how can a group of people, now 6,000 individuals, work together to create something that they own and govern, and able to launch products, both physical and digital, create events and experiences all within the community, and retain that value and accrue that value to a token. That's sort of that shared both social and financial alignment, as well as sort of that community alignment. And so
I've known Alex for a few years, many years actually, at running the summit events, and which are amazing. And anyone been to a summit event here? We have a few people. Summit was, I think, the best gathering of interesting people for many, many years, and it probably broke even, probably did fine, but there was no ownership by any of the attendees or any of the contributors to that. And I think ownership of the community is, maybe we're not talking enough about it. Like a DAO is a supranational concept. It's not regulated by America. It's not regulated by any country in the world. You join a DAO and you in some cases can speculate on the value of a coin, or sometimes simply just do it for a badge of honor, like the Ukraine DAO. But you actually have an ownership in the outcome, and so that makes not just your audience members, like all of you guys, curious. Oh, you want to learn about us and so forth. If you owned any of the value of the coins or tokens or the NFTs, you would be rooting for us, and you would help us be doing more things. And it's that ownership by the community that is not done ever before, and verifiable. The value goes up. Usually, hopefully, if you're doing good things. That's interesting, and it's not regulated by any country because anyone in the world can participate. That, of course, will run into its own issues of some form, but I don't think it'll ever take away the fundamental that the community owns the value of the future value of the project.
So the word community is really important here, right? And Benedict Anderson, as an anthropologist, talked about nations being imagined communities. And the thing about nations is they're just filled with all sorts of people who have completely different ideas. The cohesiveness of a nation, and it can vary from place to place, obviously, is always in question. So my question is, and maybe it's to you, Nadia, first of all, to think about Ukraine DAO and, of course, Unicorn DAO as well as a very specific community with this notion of the values around that community and how you define those. How important is that to the idea of generating the interest and then the participation and the sort of sustainability of these DAOs?
I love to quote Benedict Anderson. My goal with DAOs is to come up with better governance models than nation states, because I don't think that they actually reflect what's going on in the world today. The best example of that is that a chocolate bar can move from one country to another with no problems, but I can't. And that's weird, right? So I do think that we can come up with better governance models, and this experimentation that we have with Ukraine DAO, with Unicorn DAO, will show us better, more liquid models for democracy than we've seen today within our standard governments. And I honestly can't believe my own eyes when I look at our governance systems and I see that we still got stuck in this electoral cycle for 6 years, and we pretend that internet does not exist because it clearly allows us to vote so much more flexible on issues that actually influence our everyday lives. And there are countries who run experiments on that, but I don't really understand why not more countries can act like Estonia. I mean, they do have much more flexible voting about everyday issues in their country, and it allows them to be more responsive to needs of their citizens. And I think this is a big problem of, this is a global problem that people distrust politicians so much, so they want to vote for assholes like Donald Trump. But it's not like people are assholes themselves. They just really mistrust current governance systems. And what we try to solve here is actually that big problem. Tackling it, like starting from smaller issues, like for example, problem of gender gap that we tackle in Unicorn DAO or Ukraine DAO. Well, Ukraine DAO was more like a fundraiser, which I don't really, I personally stepped out of multisig from Ukraine DAO because I thought it was like more like a really focused fundraising effort. Unless somebody is going to pick it up and like develop into something bigger, I think it's going to be mostly about this fundraising effort. But it's incredible still because it allows us to be transparent, avoid bureaucracy, which is a big problem in NGOs. And I mean, if that experiment, besides raising $7 million, can show us that we can avoid throwing money at organizations like Red Cross, and I mean, I love some people from Red Cross, but the bottom line is completely not transparent and don't really know where the money goes. And yeah, and Unicorn focuses on really a really small problem, which is only 5% of NFT sales were done by female artists, and this is statistics that we saw in the end of last year, and we were terrified. And us, or female co-founders, but also a lot of male whales decided to join the DAO, and now we are rocking this boat.
Tremendous. Kimber, why don't you pick up on that, because the reference to NGOs and the bureaucracy and the efficiency, that's clearly been a big motivator for you. So how do you see, what's your sort of long-term vision for how this impacts the world of charity generally?
Yeah, I think that I'm so excited about the efficiencies of Web3, and to step back into the old world, which is frankly most of the world right now. If you want to apply for a grant, let's say it's a $25,000 grant, you would get 20 nonprofits applying for that. It would probably take them 100 hours each to put that application together. You're talking about a 60-page application. And then my team, which looks at foundations, including my own time, looks at grants, including my own time, is probably 100 hours. And so you're talking about 2,100 hours to give away $25,000, and it makes, first of all, no sense at all, because the dollars don't make any, or just simply not worth it. Unfortunately, if you increase the dollars to 500,000, well, then you'll get 500 nonprofits applying, and so it just keeps the problem just keeps scaling out in an impossible to manage way. If you're running a foundation, you want to do the right thing, and I think most people are trying to do the right thing, and so you have to properly analyze all of these grant opportunities. no one has bad intentions here, but the result is massive overhead in grant-making time, maybe 20%, I think 23 or 24% is the standard in a nonprofit's overall budget. So if you are raising 10 million a year, you're spending over 20% on fundraising. And then from a foundation's perspective, you are spending millions of dollars a year, sometimes tens of millions of dollars a year, managing those grants. This idea with a DAO, you're allowing the front lines of free justice, so these are very, very powerful, experienced, solid nonprofits, starting with 6 people, then carefully choosing the next round, which 2 people each, it's going to go to 18. And then those 18 we hope will, as carefully as possible, choose the next round. And what you're doing without any grant applications at all, without any overhead on the foundation or on the nonprofit side, you're now distributing funds. Even if what we distribute is half as effective, which I think it'll be way more effective, but even if it is just half as effective as foundation grant making, we're actually on even, because half of the money from foundations are wasted on overhead. Because you've got 25% from nonprofits and 25% from foundations. So we have the wind in our backs to go do this, and so far it has been wonderful. When I first recruited the first 6, I had to give up control, and I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a control freak, more than I realized, because I had to give up control. I don't have a vote in the DAO. I might have one in the future, but I don't have one now. And I had to literally give it up, hand over the keys to this group of 6 beautiful, amazing nonprofits. And then they went through this process, and they were thinking to themselves, oh, wow, we have this big treasury we can grant. We know all these people we want to support. And I reminded them, actually, yeah, you have that for this quarter. But next quarter, you won't. You'll be giving up control as well. And you'll be giving it up to the next 12. Now, together with them, they'll decide. And they all kind of had that same process of having to accept that this is about letting go of control. And I think that sort of really intense rewiring of the brain is needed to understand how a DAO works, and it is beautiful.
But Alex, it's not a silver bullet either, right? There's a lot of actually hard work and planning, and there are challenges, like getting people to participate and to have a governance structure that actually does function in everybody's interest. So tell us a little bit about the learnings you've had in terms of how do you maintain participation and maintain the democratic ideals, if you like, of the DAO.
Yeah, I think across the board, all DAOs that are really focused on finding ways to create clear onboarding and sort of transparency and room for involvement see higher participation in currently voting, which is mostly done through a platform called Snapshot, among a few others, with either their tokens or their NFTs that they hold. At Friends with Benefits, or FWB, we made a couple key decisions early on that allowed for the community to feel a lot more inclined to participate in the governing and the structure. And first off, it was hosting monthly town halls where we were super transparent about our budgets, what we spent money on, what we plan to spend money on, in addition to what projects are coming down the pipeline, and allowing for the community members to raise their hands, speak up, share. And we found that every time we would do one of those, we would see a surge of folks wanting to jump into specific roles. We would see voting increase. And so town halls are just a way for the leadership team to be able to speak directly with their community members or their users, or whatever framework you use was a pretty big unlock for us. And then on top of that, I think one of the most exciting things by far with the DAO is because everything's on chain, there's just a fundamental level of unprecedented transparency, which I think is really, really important. And to continue to drive that transparency and show where that data is, and encourage your community to understand how certain decisions are being made, where funds are being allocated to, also is a big driver. And then the last, I would say, honestly similar to mirroring sort of current civics or participation in our government, is localization and really driving the opportunities on a local level. And so what local might look like, say in a country, would be what's specifically happening in your neighborhood, what directly affects you on a day-to-day basis. For us, we think a lot about what does that look like in a digital context. And so that's sort of thinking about, okay, if these are the specific reasons why you participate in Unicorn or Friends with Benefits or whatever, how do you allow for folks who care most about that specific topic to be able to steward the future propagation or the future management of that topic. So for instance, in Friends with Benefits, one of our most active neighborhoods, we call it, is a whole sub-community that's really focused on NFTs. Artistic practice of NFTs, the medium, how do we push boundaries in NFTs? And a quick insight early on was, I'll never be able to accurately predict what that sub-community needs. Like, I enjoy NFTs, I collect NFTs, but not nearly at the velocity or the pace or the insight as that sub-community. And so beginning to create sort of substructures or sub-governance structures to allow for that group to begin making decisions on their, on their own, call funding for their own projects, has been one thing that we've been really pushing and exploring, and have seen like major unlocks that then feed into sort of DAO-wide governance participation.
This whole subcommittee, sub-DAO, DAO of DAOs idea is fascinating when you think about it from an evolutionary perspective, right? Like there's a biological phenomenon, these ecosystems of interest and values form, and then they spawn other ones that are more specific. I think there's so much that can be thought through in terms of what that looks like for the future of, really of democracy and of organization.
One of the things he talks about localization we've learned is we've had deforestation folks come to us, and they've asked if they do a sub-DAO of us. We're not sure if that's the right answer. Maybe they could just fork our DAO. But localization is where DAOs really shine, because if you have a deforestation activity going on in one section of the Amazonian forest, and you have one happening in Thailand, and you have one happening in Africa, so some folks in America or wherever they are donating to prevent it, but they have really no way to do accountability. And what is beautiful about a DAO is that tribe we'd have to get them on Web3, but they'll get there. That tribe whose their property is being invaded, and there's no authorities to stop them, they can actually give feedback to the DAO to say, oh, look, thank you for the support. Here's what's going on. So you don't just get funding from the DAO, you get accountability of how the funding was used from the DAO, because you can see how much money went to that area of the rainforest. The tribe can see it as well. They can confirm that the money actually came to them or whoever was trying to stop the deforestation, and then that accountability comes back, and you can now do that around the world, and that is amazing. We talk so much about DeFi in terms of the where do we put resources, but accountability is now decentralized as well, and that gives me goosebumps. It's so exciting. So,
Alex, you used the word at one point leadership, and you talked about us, and you were talking about the team that drives it, right? And Kimball, you're a well-known entrepreneur. You're a public figure. Nadia, you are a celebrity, right? So there's I think you are, whether you want to be or not. I'm sorry, but you're certainly
No, celebrity is different.
Well, certainly you're a well-known public figure, I suppose, is the best point here, right? I mean, I don't, whether it's celebrity in a broader sense of what it means. The builder. She's definitely a builder. There is no doubt about that. Absolutely. So where I'm going with this, of course, is, these DAOs start with these kind of like visions of these leaders, and then you sort of spawn. So how do you define that role, right? Because it's a challenge, and maybe Alex, you can start with, because you took on the title of mayor, and maybe talk through what that meant and why that was important to this role, because it's not just, you can't just spawn a DAO and it magically becomes a perfect democracy, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think most DAO builders would agree that in the early stages, some degree of centralization, just to get it rolling, is important in terms of figuring out the genesis of what that specific organization actually does. But at least what orients, or the sort of phrase in a lot of our community is this idea of progressive decentralization into eventual, our goal, which is exit to community, which is a great framework that Nathan Snyder sort of coined, which is, how do you eventually allow, instead of IPO, what's the equivalent of exiting ownership, governance, and everything to all of your stakeholders? And so my role early on, as being sort of on that core team, instead of being, an executive decision maker or whatever, was just taking on this title of more of a mayor, which it was started as a joke, but it kind of stuck within our community, because this idea of my role and a lot of other folks in the leadership's roles is being representative of the people of our community, and I serve our community. The token holders are sort of my core stakeholders, the people who are showing up to our town halls, who are actively participating across our events and all of our different
And they can
services.
exit. They actually have liquidity, right?
Yeah, and that's what's beautiful is I
amazing.
know at any moment they're there because if they don't want to be, they can sell. There's no trap or gating them in through some subscription model where they have to wait till the end of the month to quit or whatever. And so it's mayoral in that I represent the people and I think about not making executive decisions, but creating frameworks where other emergent sub-communities are able to grow and create their own sort of local structures. And then it's also mayoral in that we're building in sort of into the meta governance this idea that I'm also termed and that I won't be here forever. And eventually, probably in the next year or 2 years, we'll be able to elect a new sort of leader who can have their own fingerprints and their own sort of vision for what this internet city would look like. And then final in that, there's really strong checks and balances in that we're building in structures where if a series of, let's say, consequential negative decisions are made that affect the community in a negative way, can be removed through the power of governance and voting. And so it's sort of those initial, insights that made it obvious to have a leader structure that is a lot more evolutionary and can respond to whatever the community needs over a long period of time, as opposed to like a traditional corporate structure of like a CEO or a president who reigns for 30 years and it's their thing, but more how do you allow the baton passing to be really organic and fluid?
So what you're alluding to is also this deliberate act, right, of the leadership to create these structures. So Nadia, from that perspective, a public figure, somebody that is recognized, and you clearly would have been a factor in the drive of this because you're an inspiration to many people, but that then places a certain responsibility on you. So I'm wondering how you've thought about that. You talked about not wanting to participate in certain aspects of it. How do you grapple with that tension between leadership, visionary, and then transferring power to the group?
I'm taking power only when I'm useful, and I'm giving it back when I'm not anymore, like I've done with Green Dow. I was one of the co-founders and was in multi-sig, not actually because I really wanted to be on that multi-sig, but because me and my friend Veg Surfer created it, and then when we found people who can do it instead of us, we happily shifted it. I'm not really bullish on power. I think I refer to Pussy Riot as the first DAO. One of the first DAOs. Like, we didn't really have concept of a DAO at the time, but it's basically the same thing because it's decentralized. It's autonomous. We call ourselves anarchists, and we always existed not within traditional nation states, and we always would call for global solidarity and global connection of activists and people who are interested in certain topics. I mean, activist in the industry is just a person who is really, really bullish on certain topic, and that. So we were able to build this decentralized autonomous network of female and non-binary activists, and I feel like that actually taught me so much about power, about transition of power, and there were never rules that were written, but for whatever reason, it always organically would just turn in a really beautiful way. So we would get power where. So the source of our power was respect and trust. Trust that you can lead in certain areas. And I feel like DAOs are good for the same exact reason because, and they're not good for everything. I mean, we want to build platform for non-binary and female creators, and I think we're going to build it as LLC, not as a DAO, because we want to be more picky about exact people who we want to work with. But I think in certain things, in particular, I'm interested in building big people's movements. I think it totally makes sense. And we had this one moment when a girl who also was in the beginning of Ukraine DAO, she started to call herself a founder. And she's amazing. But I told her, and she might be disagreeing with me, but I said, because you call yourself a founder, not even a co-founder, not a member of the DAO, you actually make other people less motivated in performing really nicely within the DAO, because then you immediately grab too much power and you can't actually process it because you can't deliver as much value. I mean, like, what's really important to me is it's not just to grab power, but to deliver as much value as you have the power, if it makes sense.
It's fascinating. The language that we use becomes critical for these structures, right? Like founder, co-founder, these things matter. I mean, you've obviously had to think about this because you basically, this was part of your vision.
Yeah, it's
how have you grappled with it?
Yeah, it's a very very different structure than I've ever experienced before. The closest analogy that I have children, so it's more like you're birthing a child, and now when it's very young, you need a lot of oversight. You need a lot of what I call myself the coach. So instead of, I'm not CEO, I have no voting power, but I can coach them because I want it to succeed, and at the end of the day, they have to make the vote. And I remember a coaching session last month where I was with them, amazing DAO members, very powerful thinking and thoughts, and they were having this debate about how many nonprofits to fund. And one of the DAO committee members said, let's put one nonprofit should get all the money, and then we would only grow to 7 people in the DAO, and that actually would of course mean that people would retain power. Those 6 or 7 people would retain power. And one of the other DAO committee members said, wait a minute, this is our chance to seed the DAO with many people of the kind of people we want to support. In this case, it was an African-American woman. She wanted to support, her name's One Day. She builds farm stands in South Atlanta in the toughest neighborhoods and fought the city of Atlanta to allow farm stands in black neighborhoods. They were illegal. Everywhere else in Atlanta, they were illegal, but in her community, they were illegal. I mean, it's the systemic racism in our country from years back. Doesn't make any sense. She fought it for 2 years. She won it. That's the kind of person who's on this committee. She said, no, I think we should fund as many people as we trust. And in her case, there was going to be a lot of African-American women leaders. And while they were having this debate, they kind of stopped and they looked at me, and I was like, I think I need to leave the room. And it was such an amazing, powerful moment for me because I'm used to being the CEO, I'm used to being the decider and so forth. And I need to leave the room. And they didn't ask me, but they looked at me. And I was like, guys, I think this is for you guys to figure out. I'm stepping out. I'd given them as much guidance as I could.
It's always a good idea for a guy to leave the room.
Nothing can go wrong with the guy leaving the room. Nothing never fails. It's always a good move.
And what they did was in a DAO you have a constitution, you have a set of very fixed rules that require the DAO committee to change, and they changed it. And I was like, okay, I put a lot of thought into that governance, so hopefully they changed it in an okay way. And they actually just did it for this quarter, and they decided instead we were going to do ranked choice voting on nonprofits. And they said, no, each of us are going to get $50,000 each, and we're going to find people we trust to join this DAO. And then we'll go back to ranked choice when we get bigger numbers. And I was like, wow, that's very thoughtful. That's an actually very thoughtful approach, because doing ranked choice when you only have 6 voters doesn't really make sense. And I was really proud of them. So it's more like a parent and a coach.
Okay. Maybe, Alex, one way to think about this as well, though, is as DAOs grow, like
Can we talk about oligarchy?
Yes, please. Are you a fan of oligarchy at all, Nadia? Who's your favorite oligarch? No.
No, I think as we have only 10 minutes left, I think it's an important question to tackle, because as you put money in DAO and buy tokens, how do you escape the same dynamics that exist in capitalist economy? I mean, DAOs are basically cooperatives, but it doesn't. It doesn't destroy the problem of like as much. If you have a lot of money, you buy a lot of power, and different DAOs tackle it differently. I'm just interested, how do you guys go around it?
In our DAO, no matter how much money you give, you get one vote. And of course, you can fake that. There's this concept of robot donations, and we have to deal with that when it happens. But we have donors that are given more than $1 million. They get one vote. And the minimum donation is $1, and they get one vote. And that's actually been a very powerful part of our DAO. And unfortunately, we got so many donors that we haven't given any donors a vote yet. So we're sorry, but soon we're going to figure out a good donor plan. But it will not be in any way by. Well, actually, I can't speak of that. I'm not the DAO. I hope the DAO does not do it based on dollars donated, but rather on engaged members of the DAO and people who really care.
But also, I mean, like, money is not necessarily just evil. Like, sometimes money is a sign of how much you care about certain cause. So if you equal all donations to just one vote, it also disincentivizes some people to donate more, doesn't it?
I am very happy when donors come to the DAO and they donate without us asking. If you guys do want to donate, go to the giving block and just donate to Big Green. And we have no, you can, I think until recently you could do it anonymously. We changed that because that is against IRS rules, so we have to know who our donors are. But it's amazing how much financial support, but also just individual donors. You know, if you get 1,000 donors donating $10, that is so much more valuable than one donor giving you $10,000 because you have a community. And the sort of the superpower, or the secret superpower that I think people don't appreciate about Web3 is the community bonding that it creates. It is absolutely amazing to watch. I've built companies for years, decades, and building a community around whatever you're doing. It's just, I've tried it many times, and it happens sometimes by itself. Nothing compared to the community building that I've seen in Web3. And for food justice, that's beautiful for me to get that many people involved.
But picking up on Nadia's point about money and the signaling that's associated with that, right? Alex, maybe this is a chance, maybe not, because it gets confusing, but quadratic voting, can we sort of like give it a layman's, not every DAO's, you're exploring it, you've worked with it. What is it, and how does it maybe find that happy medium between, the capacity to influence but not overly?
Yeah, I think to your point about oligarchy, the unfortunate state is so many of these projects are being held by a lot of the same kind of players, and I think it's the hope that over time, as these exit from small, scrappy, let's say early primordial startups or whatever, and they become more fully functioning economies, that because of the liquidity, the tokens are able to flow and be progressively decentralized over periods of time, where eventually the ownership is significantly more distributed. So that would have been my sort of first response of like, central figures who start something, sure, they may need to feel the incentive to like really drive that. But over time, how do you build into the meta governance this idea of kind of, I loved how you said, if I no longer serve a purpose, I shouldn't be sort of, continue to have, let's say, a financial seat at the table. How do you allow for that to sort of extrapolate over a long period of time? And then the second thing is, the truth is our voting infrastructure needs to like dramatically improve. It's still very basic. And I think what Michael was saying about quadratic voting is a very exciting vision. I think Vitalik early on and laid it out, and the truth of that is it's also very complicated, and so a lot of folks haven't fully adopted it. But the layman's approach is, how do you build in more sophisticated forms of voting that rely on sort of the degree or the confidence or the conviction of a vote that is backed by sort of an allocation of resources, as opposed to just the directionality of a specific approach. So an example for that would be, there may be issues in the DAO or proposals, say, where should we do our next event? Pretty low stakes, not that big of a deal, people will vote. Or a proposal that's, should we change the fundamental operating agreement of this DAO? And if someone is able to really voice then, hey, this is a very serious issue. This is, I believe on a scale of 1 to 10, that this is my degree of conviction that this needs to change. That is weighted sort of statistically or algorithmically different than everyone just saying, oh, I have one vote and I vote on this. So still not a ton of like sort of, I guess, propagation of the use of quadratic, but the answer, I think, to preventing crazy centralization of power will just be more effective voting mechanics, quadratic being one of the more complex ones.
I think the fact that Nadia raised this through the frame of oligarchy is absolutely telling, because in fact the oligarchy, the post-Soviet oligarchy, was constructed out of the monopolization of all the tokens that were issued when they transferred state ownership of all those enterprises to the people, and big guys just came in and gathered all the coupons, right? It was the most extreme expression of what you're talking about, right? That how do we actually prevent that $1 one vote problem from emerging? But this is all sort of big picture, high level, interesting, heavy stuff. But there's also the mundane realities of like, we talked the other night about taxes, 1099 forms and stuff like that, right? It's worth like considering, maybe without going to the details of how does a DAO write its taxes. Nonetheless, thinking about, in the short period we have left, how do these entities exist within the real world of the law that's been constructed for a very different structure? And again, Alex, since you've sort of been down this road longer than most, how are you thinking about that?
Yeah, the truth is it's still a very early stage in terms of all the options, and it sort of feels like rock and a hard place of like figuring out what best options we have at this current moment in time. I think there's amazing movement being made on the legislative side, like with sort of the Wyoming DAO LLC, but it's still quite limiting in terms of its scale of it being an LLC. So then you can only have 99 sort of owners, and in a DAO, hopefully many DAOs grow into thousands and thousands of owners. And so it's sort of like the law working to catch up. Yeah, exactly, working to catch up with sort of the limitations there. But the exciting news is there's a lot of amazing DAO infrastructure being built that wants to operate with the real world, which I think is incredibly important, especially when you begin to throw, for DAOs that specifically like ours host events and festivals and physical experiences. Unfortunately, a restaurant venue won't accept crypto as payment, and they're going to need the ability to sort of off ramp. And so for us specifically, it's a DAO that owns a C corp, and the C corp is sort of where we handle taxes, healthcare, payroll, some of the mundane things that need to be attached to like physical assets. And it also allows us to do really progressive things that, for instance, will be one of the first DAOs that will offer healthcare to our contributors. Is something we care a ton about, because so many artists and creatives and freelancers exist, and all of them don't have a lot of options. And so that definitely wouldn't be possible without some sort of physical entity. Yeah.
I mean, in our case, we're a 501c3. We've been around for 10 years or 12 years now, and we have an enormous responsibility to our existing donors that have been with us for years. We've raised over $100 million helping school gardens being built around the country, and I also have my own reputation on the line, and what we were guided on was, the question was simply, do you want the American legal system to protect you, or do you not want the American legal system to protect you? And it was such an interesting question. I was like, well, I didn't realize that was a choice. In a DAO world, there is. You can, for example, go create a Swiss association, and it's a very straightforward way to have an entity, and you just choose, in that case, not to take legal protection. But people also cannot really sue you using the American legal system either, so that's also kind of interesting. We chose American legal protection, and so everything for us is done through a 501c3.
I'm very intrigued to hear what Nadia says about this, because you are, of course, an anarchist, you're self-described as. So how do you see the place of a DAO within this? And we're unfortunately running right up on time, but I think it's an appropriate place to end. If you just give us some thoughts on, are we, more time. I'll see that as a vote of confidence. Thank you. You've got more than 24 seconds. Let's give it that. Let's go as long as you need to. This is about, law, society. How do DAOs fit within all of that bigger stuff from the perspective of an anarchist?
Well, I'm privileged enough to be working with Tribute Labs and Aaron Wright and Priyanka Desai. Aaron is the author of first legislature on DAOs in the United States. So for now, my answer is I feel like we are working on important enough topics that we are able to attract the best lawyers that exist in this space. and we're honored and privileged enough to work with them, so they figure it out for us.
Okay, tremendous. All right, so that is all time we have for. I'm sure you can see this is an absolutely fascinating topic, right? There's so many. You go down this rabbit hole, and you can keep going for a long time, and it starts to raise all sorts of fascinating ideas. So you can read all about it in CoinDesk, which covers this. You can also, just to give my pitch here, this is my prerogative as the moderator, to a bit of a shill, but come to Consensus, June 9th to 12th. There'll be lots of rich conversations around DAOs. As I said, Kimball will be there. Nadi, we're going to get you there as well. Alex will be there.
Yeah, we're actually doing a financial review of the DAO.
Right, you've got your chance to actually tell us where things have gone at that point. Yeah, so please do come to that. We're excited about it here in Austin, June 9th to 12th. But most importantly, please give a big round of applause to this tremendous panel.